His handle was Fly Tire, Tire. I think his name is Norm Frechette or something like that. He does a lot of hairwing flies and a lot of you know, mostly hairwing flies between squirrel tail, bucktail. He has a website, Flies Old and New or something like that, and he does a lot of this style of fly, and along with a lot of wet flies and stuff. But I couldn't find it. There's no background I could find anywhere on it. But it's a beautiful color-wise and everything. I always loved this one, so I fish it a lot. I'd say it's my favorite crappie fly, but I say that about just about everything.
And just so everybody knows, I did start recording this, so.
Okay. So.
Good, considering Mike and I didn't know how to do that when you were vacationing.
Well, I think what happened was Tom got in first, and I think
that's right.
The first one into Teams has admin, I think.
I think you're right.
So if I was to get in ahead of him, then I would have had admin, and I would have been able to, you know, record and do whatever. So
yeah. Well, actually, Mike, I've got you set up as an admin, so I'm not sure why. I'll have to do some research on that.
I ended up being the third one into the call then, and so I didn't have any of the functions or whatever. So
okay.
And unless I just don't know how to do it. I mean, that could be the case too. So
I couldn't see it or I couldn't figure it out either, John. And it was just it was kind of a strange thing, because if I would try to admit somebody, they couldn't turn on their microphone. And yet if Mike would admit him, then he could turn on. Anyway, it was just, it was kind of just a strange thing. It was a great presentation, but then about 15 minutes and we're like, we can't figure out how to record. So it all worked out great. It was a very, very, very impressive. It was a great presentation, but
yeah, I'll bet I know what happened.
We'll know more next time.
A guest came in with the key and everything and started the meeting instead of the admin starting the meeting. I'll bet you that's what did it.
That probably messed it up.
Yeah. No, you didn't. Nah, you never mess things up.
Yeah. So this has the one that I tied here has a just hackle fibers for a tail, but the way I've seen it tied by Norm is with hackle tips. He takes two red hackle tips and puts them together, and then uses that for the tail. So that's how I'll do it when I demonstrate it. The body is gold tinsel with a gold oval tinsel for a rib, and then a yellow saddle hackle for the beard, and a red squirrel for the wing. And one thing about red squirrel is they always say with these type of flies to dress them sparsely. But with squirrel tail, if you put too much on there, you're inevitably it's gonna pull out. That's one thing about it. It's a very slick hair. It doesn't compact at all. The thread won't really crimp down on it very much. A lot of people like to use super glue. I just try to put it in as good as I can, and then lately I've been using the UV glue to make a nice head on it. So I didn't get any hooks out, so if you bear with me for a second here. Any streamer hook that's 3x or 4x long, you can go longer, but it starts to get a little awkward. And this is about a size, the size hook I usually use for this. It looks like it's about a 6 or a 4. Now with any streamer flies that use a, especially with a tinsel body. Hang on a second. Does that make the fly bigger in the? I just spotlighted the fly. I don't know if I was supposed to do that or not.
Yeah, it did. It looks good, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike, I've just got you pinned, and it's full screen for me. So
Okay.
Looks great.
All right, especially with a tinsel body, you got to be careful with what you do with the thread. Tinsel body, the tinsel lays down pretty flat. So if you've got lumps and bumps and everything, it's really going to show up. Of course, the fish don't care. But if you're doing it for, you know, you're in a contest or something like that, or you're doing it for a show fly, then you're going to want to have it as smooth as possible. So for this one, since the whole body is tinsel body, I'm going to start up near the head. And I got to put my reading glasses on. And lay down as smooth of a thread base as I can. Now, if you leave the tag long, I don't know if you can see I'm pulling that out at almost a 90-degree angle, the tag right here with my other hand. If you pull that tight against your thread, it causes all the wraps to be touching turns all the way down. It kind of forces it into that position so you can run it down a lot faster than trying to do it just by hand. Go ahead and cut that off now. So the end of the shank on most hooks is, if you let the thread hang, it's right there where the barb starts to come up. So for a tail, I've got 2 red saddle hackle feathers here. And just to kind of keep them the same, I'm going to line up the tips. Stroke the fibers back. I don't want a lot of bulk at all, so I'm just going to keep stripping it back until I get them about the length that I want it to be. Sorry if I got it off the camera there. I'm trying to get used to where this camera is for me.
no, it's good. You're good.
So I think that's about a good length for them. So I'm just going to pull these other fibers off the side just to give me a bare stem there. I should have left that stem just a little bit longer, but it's not going to make a big difference. And I'm going to do about 3 turns and then make sure that tail is the length I want it to be. That should be about right.
Switch to your fly camera, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, we lost your camera.
Sorry.
There you go.
There we go. So now I'm going to leave it right there for now, and I'm going to grab some silver tinsel. This tinsel that I use, mylar tinsel, it's gold and silver, so gold on one side, silver on the other. And if you tie it with the silver side out, then the gold side is what's going to show. One second here. So I'm going to leave that long enough to go down the body. You know, first I'm going to tie in the rib. So for the rib, I'm using, it's a medium French tinsel, oval tinsel in gold. And I'm going to tie that in first, since that is used for the rib. That to be a little bit longer. All right. There's my rib. And here's my tinsel. So I'll wrap that down the body, touching turns as close as I can. And it looks like those hackle stems aren't going to give me too much of a bump, so that's a good thing. I'm going to go to right about there, and that'd be a good idea at this point to throw in a half hitch. Now again, since the silver side was out when I tied it on, as you fold it around to wrap it, then you get the gold side out. Try to overlap a little bit each time. And as you start getting up toward the front of the fly, I don't know if you can notice that, you start to get a little bit of a bump. Sometimes if you pull on that, it'll be less. You'll actually stretch that mylar a little bit, and that open loop there will get to be a little bit less. My piece is getting kind of short here and get toward the end, so I'm having to use my finger to help. And that should be about far enough, since I have a pretty good size head on this fly. And then I'll take the rib. Now, I saw in one of Al's videos before where he placed the ribbing on the lower, I believe on the lower back side, so that when you start to wrap the ribbing, it doesn't get in the way. Since I have a little bit of thread showing right there at the tail, I'm just going to go ahead and go this way with it. I've always tried to keep no more than 7 turns on streamer fly like this. I think on wet flies, With a shorter shank, it's usually about 5. Not sure what the fly tying Bible says. So there's the body and the tail. So at this point, it's easier for me to turn that upside down. And I've got a yellow saddle hackle. I don't want to use any of this fluffy stuff down at the bottom, but I do want some bulk to it. So I want to kind of use these down toward the bottom. So right down in here, they're nice and long. They've got some web to them, so they'll kind of stand out as being pretty bulky. And I'll try to take pretty good amount and pull it 90 degrees from the stem. And then just strip those off. Now, might be easier for, I'm going to flip the camera because it might be easier for me to do it over there. A lot of times with these hackle fibers like this, sometimes when you rip them, you get them a little bit out of alignment. But you can kind of stack them by tapping on those butts where they were torn away. And a lot of times you can get them lined up pretty well. And then you can just kind of pull a few of them if it looks like they need it. I think that should be pretty close. I want the beard to be, again, I don't know if there's a rule on these, but I usually like the looks of it if it gets down to about that long right there. So looks like I'll just have to cut the curly tips off of there and make it nice flat. Is that, let me zoom in a little bit. I want to start a little ways back from the about a hook eye back and tie those down. Pretty snug. And I'll turn it and see how they look. And that looks pretty good. So give it some good tight wraps so those don't move at all. And actually, I've got quite a bit of black thread there, so I'm going to have to move this back a little bit. I don't want those to be that far forward if the head's going to be that long. I'm going to have a plenty long head on that, so. When you do it for show, sometimes you mess up a little bit. So for squirrel tail, there we go. I'm starting to run out of squirrel tail, but I've got a nice piece of pretty long squirrel tail. I think that's even from the tip because I've got just that little stem left over. I'm going to take maybe some of this down here doesn't look very good. I'm going to pull that away. Because you can see how it has like a black barring in it. Let's see how that turns out. So I'm just going to cut it loose from the tail. That's obviously way longer than I need it to be. So I can probably cut a good 1/2 inch off of there so it's not such a mess when I'm stacking it. I don't have a chapstick hair stacker, but this one does pretty good. Squirrel tail usually stacks pretty well. See how this turned out. These tips turned out pretty good. I'm going to go back through here and make sure I don't have any shorts. Flip it around. All right. Now I want the tail. Step out of my way. I want my tail to go just past that tail, the red tail there. So if I mark it with my fingers, that, and I can come back with this hand and mark where that is, and then cut them off. Then I come down at a little bit of an angle here. See that good? Cinch those down. If you do have any black thread showing at the bottom, like where I brought that beard back to, you want to make sure that when the back wrap on your wing makes that a nice smooth line. You don't want to have the end of your wing where the head is, and then over like that, there's some thread showing. So you want to make sure this is a nice clean head. Cover up all those tips. And this head should have been about 1/3 less than what it is right here, but again, the fish won't care. And I know that's going to be
The way I usually tie, I tie over the eye of the hook anyhow, so that looks pretty good to me.
That's a nice looking head, actually.
So now with the thread toward the rear, I'm going to do a whip finish toward the front.
You know, I bet this would be a great brook trout fly tied in about a size 10.
I bet it would. They like the color. Like I said, I know crappie like it. I know bass love it. White bass really like this. I used this in the Republican River in southern Nebraska,
Yeah.
down by Guide Rock.
Yep.
The white bass had run out of lakes in Kansas and run up that river to spawn. And it was almost like wading in a trout river. You just walk up until you see a nice hole and then just start running flies through those holes. And there could be like 100 white bass in one hole. So usually when you find them, they're crazy in there.
Yeah, I'm headed out to Shadron later this month, or later October, and we're going after some cutthroats and some brook trout. And I may just have to tie some of these up.
It's kind of a fun fly to tie it, especially the colors. I've always just enjoyed it just for that. I've always had a thing for hair wing, old style hair wing streamers. I'm using some of that UV resin because it makes a nice shiny head, especially if the head gets a little bigger like that. And I think it helps hold that squirrel tail in place. I'm not big on super glue. I used to use it occasionally, but sometimes it leaves a white chalky appearance on some of the materials. And I don't know if that's just how much I used or what, but
I think I've noticed that with heat, Mike, if you actually leave your bag or something in your car, I think that's where I've noticed where super glue will change it'll go to like almost a chalky.
Yeah, heat and moisture. If
Yep.
it's high humidity, we'll do that too.
all right.
Mike, you mentioned the fly tying Bible. Were you just making a reference or were you actually referencing that book? Because we use that as almost one of our program guides for fly tying. So I'm curious.
Actually, I made that up.
Oh,
You know, a lot of people say, you know, there's really no absolutes in fly tying, but when you try to be true to traditional flies like this, and Al can probably talk to some of this with, I know I've heard him talk about the number of wraps for ribbing and stuff like that. I think traditionally there's actually to make it look right. You see some flies that they look beautiful, but they've got about 12 wraps of ribbing and it just kind of, and again, I'm going by what people think, not what fish think. That's probably the most important part. But with a fly like this, it's a gold body with the gold oval tinsel. It doesn't give a contrasting color, but boy, any direction that a light comes from and hits that fly, it's going to give a glint of flash. And just that black and red contrast to the wing, I just love that fly.
beautiful. Nicely done.
So that's
Yeah,
$1.
that's absolutely beautiful. I love the red and the yellow and the
Yeah.
squirrel tail. It just works.
Yeah, it's nice to fly.
Well, it's a good thing you like red and yellow because the next one, called the Mormon Girl, is another beautiful fly, and it's also red and yellow.
I'll be darned. You know what? I got one of those that was tied for me by Don Peterbaugh.
No way.
No, I'm kidding you not. Yeah, he tied that for me years ago for I was going up to Lake Josephine on a backpacking trip, and he tied that up for me for brook trout.
Really? Well, this I know the streamer version of this. Roy Donnelly, I think is the guy's name, around the Jackson Hole area. It was a pretty popular fly in the Yellowstone area. But like a lot of streamers, it was actually kind of dreamed up based on a wet fly. There's a wet fly called the Mormon Girl. And I tied one up based on what I found, trying to get it into where you can see it right there. It's got a red tag, a red butt there, and then a yellow front, where the streamer is pretty much half and half. This just has a red butt and a yellow body with a gold wrap, but it's got a badger hackle palmered through the body there. And let me put it in here so I can maybe show it a little better.
Yeah, Mike, that's a fly that I started fishing back in the early 60s, and it was real good then. It's still good today.
The wet fly version?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
another good steelhead. That's probably a good steelhead fly too.
I'll bet it is. But the wing is mallard flank, and then it's got a grizzly palmer. And I gave it a few more wraps at the front and pulled them down to give it kind of more of a beard, because I just like that. that look a little bit. But that's basically what that was based on. The Mormon Girl streamer was based on that Mormon Girl wet fly. So this uses golden pheasant tippet. So I don't have a crest anymore, the full head. But when you buy it as a head, you actually get a it looks like some voodoo thing or something. It's actually a pheasant head with the beak and everything, and it's got the crest feathers are a yellow. Hang on a second, got them right here. The crest feathers are beautiful yellow, curved feathers, and they're used a lot in in salmon flies and even some wet flies as tails. A lot of the Scottish and Irish flies use this for tails. Kate McLaren is one of my favorites. Irish flies, it uses that for a tail. But then lower down where actually the hackles would be on a chicken, or is where the tippets are. And so I've taken them off of the head and kind of sized them up into different bags here. So they're flat across the end. They don't come to a point like chicken hackle feathers do. These are all flat like that. And so that's what the tail is made of. It's a red floss body. I misinterpreted the tying instructions that I had found online, and I really didn't like the way it looked. Is to wrap the gold over the red body and then onto the yellow chenille front part. And I think the intent was to stop at the red and not rib that chenille. I just don't think that looks very secure, like a couple fish's teeth, and that's just going to start pulling apart. I looked around and I found some pictures online of the Mormon Girl streamer, and the yellow chenille does not have ribbing through it. So the one that I demonstrate, then I won't do that. Has a grizzly for a beard, and for the one I demonstrate, I'll do the beard a little bit different than I did on the yellow beard of the cornbuck. And although the wing looks
Mike,
pretty similar, yeah, go ahead.
Before you get started, I totally apologize, but I do have to leave. But darn, you're putting on an awfully good presentation. You should be proud.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thanks for coming in.
Hey, Al, I will email you a link to where I put the video.
Excellent. Thank you so much, because I'd like to go in and watch the second part.
You got it.
Thank you now. Good night.
Thanks, Al.
Again, Al.
Night.
All right.
So the wing on this one is actually, it's a lot softer. It'll probably move a lot more in the water than the squirrel tail. Squirrel tail is a little stiff. This is actually badger hair, and it only uses the guard hairs for the wing. So there's a little bit of waste, but what you pull out of there could be used as a dubbing on larger flies, I suppose. Well, we'll take a look at that in a second. So that over here, and grab another hook. On this one, I'm going to start halfway because the red goes about half of the body. And so I just don't need to do that much of an underbody at this point. I'll just start at the halfway point. the reason you want to stop right at the shank, you want to get as much body on there as you can. You don't want it to be like too far forward. But if you go too far around the bend, then your tail starts to like point downward, and it just doesn't look as nice. Again, the fish probably aren't going to say anything, but they can't talk, so they won't say anything. Does anybody remember the GIMP
Yeah.
fly
a
that they did
lot of-
a while back? These actually have a little similar feather to that GIMP feather. See that little small feather attached to the base of that? If you wanted to tie a small GIMP, you could use them from a golden pheasant. The GIMP feather is from a Amherst, a Lady Amherst pheasant, and they're a lot bigger and bushier. So here's one that I've cut some off of when I did the flies to show you as a. If you look on some of these, as you get out toward the, I think you can see that. As you start to get out toward the sides, some of these little barbs don't have as wide of a black tip on it. So if you want to get picky, you can pull some of those away. And that's actually about enough to make a good tail.
Mike, remind me someday. I'll tell you about my experience shooting golden pheasant in Korea.
Oh, no way. Well, I bet those are probably kind of hard to kill because there's so many feathers hanging everywhere. Their tails are so
Yeah.
long and everything.
There's a big body, a lot of mass to shoot at, and not much to hit.
Wow. So that's got one side that's really dull, just like most feathers, almost a dull yellow, but then that side's the beautiful gold color. So if you just kind of, it's frustrating sometimes when you try to tie one of these tails in and you end up with too much of the lighter colored feathers toward the outside. So I just kind of try to roll it, fold it about like that, and just get it kind of bunched together. So I want the tail to be kind of hard to describe. You just kind of get a feel for what you like the looks of. You don't want to hang off of there too far, but that looks like about a good distance. So in this case, I think I'm actually gonna go backwards on this a little bit. I'm gonna say I want that to be about halfway down the shank, so I'm just gonna cut it like that. And if I haven't handled that too much, the tips will still be aligned pretty well. I think they are. So again, touching turns. Okay. Now I'll need for a rib. I believe I used that same tinsel. So I'll just get another piece since I'm kind of starting to run short on that. Usually I'll cut a piece that's quite a bit longer than I need and then use it for 3 or 4 flies. So again, that medium French oval tinsel. I just love how that looks on some of these flies. You can use a flat tinsel to rib it with as well. I've got this is a pretty fine, it's size 16-18. This is a really fine flat tinsel. And it's again silver on one side, gold on the other. And I've used that before for this kind of ribbing.
Mike, do you think you could use smaller brassy gold wire if you didn't have that tinsel?
Absolutely. And that's what I was talking, that's what I was kind of joking about the fly fishing Bible is, you know, you can look at a pattern sometimes and even look at the materials list. You don't have to have a Gamakatsu 4902 and you know, wood duck tan thread, and you know, I mean, people get very specific in the materials that are required for a fly, but really all you need is something to secure the red floss that's used for the body and make it more durable, but also give it a little bit of flash. So you could use whatever size gold wire you have, flat tinsel. If you have like a thicker oval tinsel or something, you could use that, just as long as it doesn't cover up too much of the red. So that would be definitely be a good substitute.
Is there
this
anything that makes tinsel more stronger?
Pardon me?
Is there anything that makes tinsel more durable? Tinsel isn't real durable, I found.
It will kind of fray apart, and sometimes when I'm tying with it, if I've used a piece quite a bit and run it through my fingers,
Yeah.
it'll start to unravel, because it's basically like a cotton core with the like a very small flat tinsel woven around it. So I'm going to actually end up with you can't really see it, but I'm going to end up with my ribbing toward the lower back, like I saw in one of Al's videos one time. So there's my rib. For the body, most of the floss, at least that I have, comes in 4 strands, but 4 strands ends up being kind of bulky. So a lot of times I'll use 2 strands. It pulls apart if you look at it at the end of it right there. You can actually separate out 2 or 3 of the strands depending on how thick you want that material to be. I also have that kind of more of a garnet, like a darker red color. I kind of like that too, and I have 2 pieces left of that, so I'm going to use that. Another good substitute. I wouldn't use 70 denier, but if you have a red tying thread that's maybe 140 denier or thicker, I've seen it like 360, 380, something like that. I've seen it. And you can use that tying thread actually to wrap that body. So I'm going to pull that through until it's about halfway. And if you moisten that a little bit, it'll kind of behave better. Okay. Now, I'm going to wrap I'm going to actually wrap this reverse. A lot of times, whether it's pheasant tail or different materials that are more less durable, sometimes it's better if you wrap them in the opposite direction and then wrap your ribbing in the normal direction when you reverse wrap, because when you tie off the ribbing and it's going in the backwards direction, your thread wants to push against it so it can kind of loosen that ribbing. I'll show you when we get to that point. But I'm going to take the tinsel and let me zoom out a little bit here. Actually, run that through your fingers. If you've been doing a lot of yard work, you're just gonna shred this stuff to bits.
Yeah,
But if you have an office job, then you don't have to worry about it, I guess. If you do that, it'll kind of bring those all those little individual fibers a little closer together.
Jergens hand lotion works wonders.
Yeah,
yes, it does. I agree. Emery board works pretty good too.
what was that last one?
Emery board works pretty good too. If your hands are all rough,
Right.
take it smooth off the roughness.
Yep. I should have music for this part, but I don't, and I don't sing well. So John, you want to go ahead and hum us a tune?
No.
Okay. So I'm
I
gonna
spent
stop
4
right about-
years in the Catholic choir, but that was a long time ago.
As you can see, the direction I came up around from the back like that. So when the tying thread goes around, it actually kind of pushes against that. So with this thinner material, this floss, that's not going to really push it that much. Once you get a couple wraps, it doesn't matter. And you can just wrap that forward a little bit and then cut it away. Now, I've done it before and it does work, but with a thicker material like wire or this thicker tinsel, when you're going in the opposite direction, you try to tie it off, it pushes against it and it can really loosen it and cause trouble. So at this point, the thread's going in the same direction as the wrap, so it doesn't have that problem. And I'll cut that part out of the way. For the body, the front part of the body, yellow chenille. You know, this is a medium, I think. I don't even remember where I got it. It must have been in a bag with a label on it, but it's a medium chenille. Anything thicker than that, I think it would be too bulky up there. Should have done that on camera. So the chenille is just a bunch of fuzzy stuff with a cotton core. So if you pull on that, you can actually pull some of that yellow fluff away from there. And you expose that. It's not focusing very good, but you expose that cotton core. That. So that way you don't have a bump there. You don't have bulk when you tie it down. I'll tie that in nice and tight. And advance forward. And I shouldn't have as big of a head as I did last time. Where's my half hitch? I missed. It's like I tied that a little bit too far forward and I did a half hitch, so just go back over it. Tie that back a little further. See how I was way forward in my red there? Right about there. The chenille is a little more forgiving, so you don't have to worry about thread bulk. Sometimes if you fuss around with that a little bit, you can get some of the yellow fibers out of there and it's not so bulky. That should be pretty good. So that's the body part. For, you know what? I got, what I was going to do for the beard was to tie a hackle in and then wrap it several times. And then you can take those fibers and take all of those hackle fibers and stroke them down and hold them down below and then make some wraps over that. And then that brings the beard down to where it's pointing downward. Do you see what I'm saying? I've kind of bulked that up a little bit too far toward the eye. So I really can't use that method. I'm just going to have to pull off some fibers and tie them in underneath. But if you understand where I was going with that, excuse me, is just to tie in a hackle stem and then wrap it like you would a hackle. Just do about 4 or 5 turns and then cut that off. And then once that's all sticking out in different directions, you just take it from the top and just stroke it downwards and hold it down with your hand and then wrap over those butts and wrap back a little bit. And that'll pull them backward and down to give you a nice full beard. That's just a different way to do it. In this case, I can't because of the way I crowded the head a little bit. So I'll grab a bunch of grizzly hackle fibers instead. That looks like about enough. About the same. I'll just probably have to clip that clump off at the end there to make it the right length. Turned out okay. Then I'll flip it back around for the badger. So this is a patch of badger fur. And if you remember where we talked about all the muskrat with the under fur and then the guard hairs, this has really nice barred guard hairs. But the problem is you got to grab a pretty good sized hunk in order to get enough guard hairs to make that wing with. So that might be a little bit too much. I'll grab about that much. And one thing about it though is we're going to stack this. So if you end up not getting enough guard hairs, you can always go back and grab another clump and put it in the stacker and give it a few more stacks and that'll all come together. So sometimes it's a critical snip when you pull that hair away there, whether it's going to be the right amount or not. So you can see I got a lot of underfluff there. I'm just going to grab those tips and pull them straight out and leave that underfur behind.
Oh,
Again, if that was muskrat, you could use it for dubbing. This is a little bit coarse, but for dubbing for big flies, you could probably use it. So I'll just gather those guard hairs and see if I have enough. I think I'll have just about the right amount. So I'll go to the hair stacker again. I expected Al to make a comment for me teasing him about his chapstick tube hair stacker. But he said he's used that for 30, 40 years. And if it works, why fix it? So flip back around. So there's what I ended up with after stacking the tips. I'll just lay it up there. Get a judge for how long I want that wing to be. Transfer it over to this hand, and then I know where to cut that off. I just cut it off right there. Come down at an angle. Trap those in. Another way you can do this sometimes if you're having trouble, sometimes your wing will roll over. When you tie your wing in, the thread torque will take that wing and want to roll it over to the other side. If you have a problem with doing that a lot, you can take a wrap around the hair like that, and then make another wrap that pulls all that down. And if you cinch it down like that, that'll bring it right on top. And sometimes that won't roll around.
Yeah, I've seen that technique used on, oh shoot, the Mickey fins.
Right, because you've got to separate the yellow and the red on that. And that helps them clump together.
Yeah, exactly.
So now I'll just clean up that head a little bit here. Now the good thing about this badger, since it's softer, the thread will kind of crimp down into that a little bit and give it a little more secure of a hold. Well, that turned out pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
And again, I like how soft that is. I think that'll really move in the water. I have not tried this for the crappie, so I can't say this is my favorite crappie fly like I always do. Shape this a little bit so the head's not so pointy.
Speaking of crappies, have you been out to Walnut Creek lately?
I went out there after it was full, and there was a little bit of like bank weeds. Since it was drained for so long, there's a lot of bank weeds growing, and little cottonwood trees and stuff like that growing in where it had filled up. There's a lot of weeds out there again right now, so I don't know if it was a new cycle of that lake weed or what. But about this time of year when the water cools, those weeds usually drop and they lose all their cover, so they start to congregate around that fishing pier.
Yeah.
And that's the time to go. When it's too cold to fish, that's usually when they're in there.
There you go. Yeah, I've talked to Larry Pape out at Game and Parks, and he said that Cunningham has turned into a heck of a fishery since they did all the stocking and the refilling. So I'm going to give that a try this weekend, I think.
Ah. I was watching a video the other day. You know, I'm talking about with the whip finish where Al Beatty was showing us how when you whip finish from front to back and you pull it tight, you've got a piece of thread on the outside of those wraps. And so if a fish nicks that, then your head's going to unwind. So you always want to whip finish from as you're making those wraps. You always want to whip finish from back to front. Then when you pull it tight, that thread that you pull will go underneath those wraps.
Yeah.
So I've seen it demonstrated on with like a large piece of chenille or like a large piece of yarn. So it's easier for you to kind of see that. But try using a real thick thread and try doing a whip finish both ways, starting from the eye of the hook back and then pull it tight. And then do one from the back of the head toward the eye and pull it tight. And then compare the difference of what that head looks like. And you'll see that that thread pulls underneath when you go back to front. So
Kind of like when you're doing a tie off on a rod, when you're building a rod or tying in a guide.
exactly. If you're doing those wraps and you pull it the wrong way. And I've done that before after I thought I knew what I was doing, just not paying attention. I ended up putting my pull through loop, I put it in the wrong direction and ended up, yes.
Gee, I've never done that.
I'm laughing near you, John, not at you.
Yeah, I've been building rods since '75, and I don't know how many times I've done that.
Well, I was actually, when I was watching this, Mike, and I thought it was great how you actually slowed down with that whip finish and thought about the process, because there's too many times where, people just, oh, this is just the last part, and how to cinch that down. And I mean, that's actually one of the most important keys on finishing your fly. So I just all of a sudden, just kind of keyed in and was watching you move that thread, and how you can also finish out the head throughout your whip finish. I mean, it's crucial to not have your flies fall apart, but I love that attention to detail.
It was funny, I was watching a video where Tom Rosenbauer and Tim Flagler were doing a tie off.
I saw that.
Same fly. They've got several out there. And this one I hadn't seen before. Both of them, when they did their whip finish, they did it front to back. It's just one of those things you don't think about. And so since we just had that video with Al, that's in my mind all the time. And the last time I was tying something, I think I said to Al, I just did that whip finish wrong, but the next one I'll try to do right.
And especially if you've been tying for a while, and it's the same as, so I put my dubbing on, and I always do my dubbing towards the hook eye, or towards the eye of your hook. And yeah, I was schooled on that. I was putting on my dubbing on wrong, and I can do it both ways now, which I like to know how to do that. But I thought that was really funny, because when you've been doing it for a while and you don't stop and think and go, well, why wouldn't this work? But it's amazing when you look at a fly that the head has come off and you look at it and go, what happened here? Because every time, if you're cinching on the same and you're still trying to get it to hook into that hook shank as close as you can, but it's that one little detail. It's like tying a slip knot wrong.
You were severely chastised, Amy. I was there for that. Yes,
Oh,
I remember.
I know. And what was funny about it is I don't know. I mean, so much of it becomes kind of self-taught as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what works for us, and it's trial and error. And I truly believe, as far as, you have to know how the materials work, and you have to enjoy the materials you work with. I've told you over and over, I do not like to tie with bucktail. I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the way it feels. I don't know what it is, but I do not like to tie with bucktail. And so
it's like I tell my students, all I can do is show you some approved techniques. You've got to decide how to do it yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, that looks so much better without that rib going over the yellow.
Looks a lot better.
I agree. Yeah. I love that fly. That is a beautiful fly. I'm going to tie some of them for my trip out to West.
Yeah, I'm definitely I'll try some this fall, but Big Elk and Portal, those two new lakes are open now. And so some of these mornings I want to go out there and see if I can get, there's smaller smallmouth in there, but I want to actually get a smallmouth on a flat rod this time.
Is that, are those the two new lakes down in Sarpy County?
Yep.
Yeah, WP 6 and 8, I think they are.
Yeah, they're not. They're named Portal and Big Elk now, and they're 114th
Yeah,
Uh,
and 108th and Cornhusker.
114th and Cornhusker, and I think 120th is the other one.
108th.
Is it?
Yeah.
So 108th
Yeah,
and 120th, something
yeah,
like that.
and they have stocked a ton of smallmouth and yellow perch in there, so it should be
Ooh.
fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
The size of them, when they did the initial stocking, the size of them were pretty small, so it was going to be something that was, not real nice sized fish in a few years. But when they drained, I think it was Two Rivers Trout Lake, or there was a lake either at Two Rivers or Louisville or something like that, where they had smallmouth and trout in there. And
Yeah.
it got with the big floods that we had, it got overrun with undesirables. But to those that don't like carp. And so they drained it, and when they did, they took all the smallmouth out of there, and some of them were almost 5 pounds.
Yeah.
And so they stocked about maybe between the two lakes, I think they stocked about 60 or 70 real nice smallmouth in there. So I'm going to give it a try. I think there's some bank access.
Yeah, Two Rivers behind the forest ranger station. When you first come in, that lake there in the back, that's where they stocked them at. There is some access there, not a whole lot. But
Okay. Yeah, there's a real nice kayak launch there. I'd never seen one of those before. If I had a kayak, that'd be a good thing. But I mean, it's real cool where there's two different ways you can run them off of there, and it's just like this thing where you just slide right down that thing and then you're launched. So I'd never seen one of those before.
Very cool. Yeah, we actually have groups here as much as, well, not nearly comparable to like TU or the trout groups or anything, but we have one that's called Smallmouth Alliance, and their whole theme is free the fighter. And when you learn about how long it takes for those smallmouth to grow, that when you're catching a 5 pound one, it's like a 17-year-old fish or something. I mean, it's just it is a whole different appreciation for the aquatic life on that side. And they fight. We can get those a lot in our area in Missouri just because of the warm water. We have equally, if not more, warm water streams to do that. But I haven't ever had one yet on a lake, which would be kind of a whole different thing because they're sneaky. They are.
Yeah, they are. Lake McConaughey is our best smallmouth lake in this state, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, they are, and man, they just run completely different. It's just, and we had a couple different times we were able to get on some this summer with, and it even in the heat, they'll still, but it practices just good technique, under brushes, under overhangs, you're looking for shadows, you're going deep. It's just, it's a fun fish to go hunt.
Well, one thing I thought was amazing what they did to the bottoms of these lakes before they filled them. They were built, I think, just for housing developments and flood control. And then they were to build houses around them and everything to make them like a neighborhood lake kind of thing. But the game and parks and everybody was all involved, and that's how they've been doing these reservoirs lately. And so there are rock piles that almost go to the surface of the water. There are just tons of rocks through there and wood piles and just huge changes in depth here and there, holes and shallows, and it's just amazing what thought and hopefully science went into that to make these hopefully successful for smallmouth, because we're not in a good area for flood control reservoirs that get muddy and spring rains and everything. It's just not good habitat for smallmouth. But
we don't even, to my knowledge, we don't even have smallmouth in our lakes for our conservation areas or just again, like the residential, like what you're talking about, Mike. I to my knowledge, we don't at all. Ours tends to be bluegill, crappie, lots of the, yeah, I mean, it is catfish. You'll get largemouth bass, you get a lot of those. But one of the things too is that if you ever get a chance to serve on where you say, can you just slow down how many Christmas trees that they dump in? So our community areas here, you take them and you drop them off, and then they take them around all of our county parks and lakes, and they dump the Christmas trees in to provide that habitat. Oh, that is a fisherman's nightmare. Because it takes them a long time for those Christmas trees to break down. I mean, it's great habitat. When you're getting a 2-pound bluegill out of there and you look and you go, what? I mean, they're morphed. It's amazing because they just survive. It's incredible. But man, the Christmas tree season here starts right around, well, the middle. They don't start really stocking until the end of January. But that's almost the tail end of our catch and release seasons. So that's when they actually want you to catch it and keep it and take it out. And then they replenish on some of the other more cold water fish that they put in. But it's cool. I think anything you can see like that, and you just see that they're thinking through it as opposed to just digging a concrete hole.
Amy, different subject. I think I'm going to take this video and put it up on a YouTube like Mick is doing.
Oh shoot!
Then,
I forgot you were recording this. No.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I just happened to think I probably need to shut it down. But yeah, I think I'll do the same thing like Mick does. We'll just put it up on the YouTube, and